analysis stems from the realization that traditional analysis of documents are insufficient, incomplete, in the sense that they treat documents essentially as pure tools, instruments, and they leave them in a sort of passive sort of status, which I think is only a very small part of the question. The analysis I propose is to really seriously take the idea that there is a sociology of people, that's obvious, we've had that for a long time, but also sociology of machines and a sociology of documents. Now let's look quickly at those three things. I'll leave aside the sociology of people, taking for granted that everybody knows more or less what that might entail. But let's take a look at the sociology of machines. Then we see something different. We see that through the way machines are organized, for example, in productive chains, or in the case of computers, in the kinds of networks that they create to communicate with each other, we see that there are variations, there are different possibilities. For example, in the case of networks, some networks are not really networks. They are pyramidal centers with dumb terminals. But you also have real networks, or you have semi-networks. You have all sorts of configurations that are possible, which allows us to think in terms of a sociology of machines. And you have, in terms of documents, you have associations between documents. By the way, by document, I mean an extension of the text. It includes video, it includes sound, it includes pictures, it includes software. You have associations between documents which can be organized by various agencies, such as a library. A library will organize juxtapositions of books, for example, on shelves, and that creates, in effect, de facto, a kind of sociology of books, because when you go and pick up one of these books, you're tempted to look at the books next to them, and you start exploring these books according to the logic that these shelves provide for the way you look at them. Well, Google does the same thing for us. Google, by searching through many digitized documents, provides us with lists, therefore proximities of documents, and these documents de facto may appear as a possible family of documents, a kind of a group of documents. Except that in the case of Google, we don't know how it was done, really. So we are in a sense taken in the way of looking at the world through devices of, let's say, community of documents creation, which may affect our construction of meaning. And at the end, we have a worldview which has been, in effect, created by a Google algorithm. So these are the kinds of issues that come in this question of documents, machines, and people. Knowledge is owned by no one. Fundamentally, knowledge cannot be owned by anyone, because if knowledge is owned by someone, then it's no longer possible to build upon it. Or you have to build upon it according to the conditions of the ones that claims to own it. So, you know, the optimal way of making knowledge live, grow, develop is by claiming and, in fact, asserting that knowledge is everybody's knowledge. Everybody should be in there. That's why I regularly speak about a republic of science and not a monarchy of science or an oligopoly of science. And we have to restore the conditions for a true republic of science at the world level. And I think countries like Brazil, India, China, Russia, South Africa have a big role to play to start creating alternative poles of scientific quality in order to force the centers, present centers, to realize that science cannot develop under the monopoly of a few publishers. They have to realize that it is a multipolar world with various interests, different orientations, and yet everybody is doing very good science. What the Google Book system is doing is really something, to my mind, extremely perverse. Because what Google is doing is offering the appearance of giving everybody access to tons of books which are indeed spread and hidden all over the place. And that, I must say, is a true given. But it's a very limited given. What they are really after is what that engineer said once to an author whose name escapes me. He said, you know, we've digitized all these documents, not for people to read, but for machines to read. Again, document, machine, and people. And the result of that is that the plan of Google is really clear. Google wants to take all the paper, printed or written text into the digital world, give us a facsimile of the paper as a gift, quotation marks, and then reserve for itself all the algorithmic potential all the stuff that machines can do when they read documents. How do you manage to get high quality documents through a participation that bars no one, and by simply a system of debates and discussions among people? It's the ultimate democracy, in effect, you know. And in the same reasoning that says we get the best political choices by having a good democracy is also behind the Wikipedia project. Now, before we get to that utopian level of a completely open and well-working Wikipedia, we are going to have to go through a number of many steps. The network approach is truly a revolution, which goes, in fact, you're right to mention capitalism. It goes, in fact, deeper than capitalism. I think it goes all the way down or up to the notion of what is an individual. Now, say, in the traditional visions of individualism coming out of religion, Catholicism, or the Soviet type of communism, the individual is an emanation of a totality. You know, it's the society on the one hand, or God on the other, that emanates and gives individuals. In capitalism, you have a theory of the individual who is really like an atom. Each individual can stand on his own, completely separate from the others, in an autarkic, totally self-sufficient kind of ideal, and then they can start dealing with each other on the basis of this complete, fundamental, radical separation of each one from each other. I think we're moving through network theory into a third vision of the individual, which I like to call myself phonemic individual, to use the image of the phoneme in linguistics. A phoneme is a very interesting entity because it looks like an atom. You know, each phoneme is different, except it's an atom that exists only to the extent that it can demonstrate its difference from other atoms. We live by a principle of distinction and not absolute ontological existence. It's, we understand each other to the extent that we share things together, and we think we innovate to the point that we distinguish each other from the others, but in such a way that you don't look totally crazy. Because if you innovate in a really radical way, people will simply not understand you, and they'll think you're simply crazy. So you have this kind of extremely interesting margin of maneuver between existence and relationship, which is really part of a network philosophy. And you have this new individuality that's coming along, called what I like to call phonemic individuality. That's a revolution. If that comes to be, if our societies really begin to be organized in a conscious and complete way around networks and phonemic individualisms, we're going to end up with very different laws and very different power systems than we have right now. That's called a revolution.